stop right where you are and listen to me. Because there are moments in your life when God does not send you another explanation. God sends you a command. There are moments when God does not give you another sign. God gives you a direction. There are moments when God does not ask you to understand everything that is happening around you. God simply says, pack your bags. It is time to go. And when God says it is time to go, you cannot afford to remain standing at the door arguing with yesterday. You cannot keep sleeping in a place that God has already told you to leave. You cannot keep carrying the furniture of an old season into a new assignment. You cannot keep asking God to bless what God is commanding you to abandon. There comes a moment when faith must become movement. There comes a moment when your prayer must become obedience. There comes a moment when you must stop looking backward and start walking forward. Because the voice of God is calling you out of what has been and into what is coming. Maybe you thought the delay meant denial. Maybe you thought the closed door meant your life was finished. Maybe you thought the disappointment meant God had forgotten your name. But what if the door closed because God was separating you from something that could never carry you into your future? What if the rejection was not the end of your story, but the interruption that forced you to move? What if the place where you cried was never supposed to become the place where you stayed? What if the season that broke your heart was the season that broke your attachment to what was too small for your calling? Listen carefully. Sometimes God has to make you uncomfortable before you become willing to move. Sometimes God has to shake your surroundings because you have become too comfortable with a life that no longer fits the purpose God placed inside you. You have been asking God, why is everything changing? And God is saying, because you are changing. You have been asking, why can I no longer remain where I was? And God is saying, because I am taking you where you have never been. You have been asking, why does this feel so uncertain? And God is saying, because if you could see everything clearly, you would not need faith. You want a map. God gives you direction. You want 10 years of details. God gives you the next step. You want guarantees. God gives you His word. You want to know who will come with you. God says move. And sometimes that is all the instruction you are going to receive. Pack your bags, not because you know every road, but because God knows the destination. Pack your bags, not because you understand the timing, but because God understands the season. Pack your bags, not because you have every resource, but because God is greater than what you lack. Pack your bags, not because you are fearless, but because obedience is more powerful than fear. Pack your bags because the chapter is changing. Pack your bags because your attachment to yesterday cannot become your prison tomorrow. Pack your bags because there are places you cannot enter while you are still emotionally living in places God has already brought you out of. There are people who will never understand why you had to leave. Let them misunderstand. There are people who will question your decision. Let them question. There are people who will tell you that you are moving too quickly. Let them talk. When God gives you direction, you do not need everybody's permission. When God gives you conviction, you do not need everybody's applause. When God tells you to move, You do not stand at the starting line waiting for the crowd to agree with you. You obey God. You trust God. You walk with God. And when you have no human explanation, you hold on to the fact that God does not need human approval to fulfill what God has spoken. You have spent too much of your life trying to convince people that your future is real. Stop it. You do not have to explain every movement God is making in your life. You do not have to defend every transition. You do not have to give everybody access to every detail of your journey. Some things are between you and God. Some instructions are sacred because they were never meant for public debate. When God gives you a direction, protect it. When God gives you a dream, nurture it. When God gives you a new beginning, do not poison it by constantly comparing it to the old beginning. When God tells you to go, go. But understand this. Packing your bags is not merely physical. God may be asking you to leave a place, but God may also be asking you to leave a mindset. God may be telling you to leave bitterness. Leave it. God may be telling you to leave fear. Leave it. God may be telling you to leave the habit of expecting failure. Leave it. God may be telling you to leave the need for everybody to approve of you. Leave it. God may be telling you to leave the identity that was built from your worst experience. Leave it. God may be telling you to leave the belief that your past has the authority to determine your future. Leave it. Some of you have packed your clothes, but you have not packed your courage. You have changed your address, but you have not changed your thinking. You have walked away physically, but your heart is still sitting at the old table. You are carrying old conversations into new mornings. You are carrying old insults into new opportunities. You are carrying old disappointments into new relationships. You are carrying old fear into new possibilities. God is saying, you cannot go forward while constantly rehearsing what happened behind you. There is a time to remember, and there is a time to release. There is a time to learn from the past, and there is a time to stop living there. Your past may explain you, but it does not own you. Your failures may have taught you, but they do not have the right to name your future. Your losses may have wounded you, but they do not have the authority to decide where you will finish. God has not run out of chapters because one chapter was painful. God has not run out of opportunities because one opportunity collapsed. God has not run out of roads because one road ended. You are looking at the ashes, and God is looking at the possibility. You are counting what was lost, and God is preparing what is next. You are measuring your resources, and God is measuring your willingness. You are asking whether you have enough strength, and God is asking whether you are willing to trust. You are asking whether the road will be easy, and God is asking whether you are willing to walk it even when it is difficult. Do not confuse difficulty with the absence of God. A hard road does not mean God has abandoned you. A lonely season does not mean God has forgotten you. An uncertain tomorrow does not mean God has lost control. Sometimes the hardest road is the road that removes everything you depended on except God. Sometimes God allows you to reach the end of your own strength so that you can discover that God's strength does not end where yours does. You have been saying, I cannot do this. Perhaps that is true. Perhaps you cannot do it alone. Perhaps you were never designed to carry the future by yourself. Perhaps the point is not for you to become strong enough to control everything. Perhaps the point is for you to become faithful enough to trust God when you cannot control anything. There is a difference between confidence in yourself and confidence in God. Confidence in yourself says, I have everything figured out. Confidence in God says, I do not have everything figured out, but I know who I trust. Confidence in yourself says, I know exactly how this will happen. Confidence in God says, I do not know how, but I believe God can make a way. Confidence in yourself depends on evidence. Faith in God depends on conviction. And I want you to hear this clearly. Your lack of information does not cancel God's instruction. You may not know where the next opportunity will come from. Go anyway. You may not know how the finances will work. Trust God anyway. You may not know who will support you. Walk anyway. You may not know how long it will take. Continue anyway. You may not know what waits around the corner. Move anyway, because faith is not the absence of uncertainty. Faith is the decision to obey God in the presence of uncertainty. There are seasons when God says, stay, and there are seasons when God says, go. Wisdom is knowing the difference. Do not move because you are frustrated. Do not stay because you are afraid. Do not run because you are emotional. Do not remain because you are comfortable. Ask God, listen, seek clarity. Then, when conviction comes, obey. Some of you have been waiting for a perfect moment. There is no perfect moment. There is only the moment God has given you. You keep saying, when I have more money, I will begin. When I feel confident, I will move. When everybody agrees, I will go. When the circumstances improve, I will obey. But if you make perfect conditions your requirement for obedience, you may remain in the same place for the rest of your life. God does not always call people when everything is convenient. God calls people when they are willing. God does not always wait until the road is visible. God asks whether you trust the one who sees the road. Look at your life. Look at what God has already brought you through. There were days you thought you would not survive, but you did. There were mornings you woke up with tears in your eyes, but you still got up. There were moments when you had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but tomorrow came. There were doors you thought you could never open, and somehow a way appeared. There were burdens you thought would crush you, and somehow you kept breathing. Why do you think God brought you through all of that? Not so you could remain afraid of the next chapter. Not so you could worship your scars. Not so you could spend the rest of your life telling the story of what almost destroyed you. God brought you through because your journey is not finished. You are not at the end, you are at a transition. And transition is uncomfortable because the old is familiar while the new is unknown. The old may have been painful, but at least you knew what pain to expect. The new may be better, but you cannot yet predict it. That is why people sometimes choose familiar misery over unfamiliar possibility. They know how to survive the old, so they are afraid to trust the new. But God is not calling you to survive forever. God is calling you to move. Pack your bags. Leave the old assumptions, leave the old excuses, leave the old fear, leave the old labels, leave the old shame, leave the old resentment, leave the old identity. Leave the old environment if God is truly calling you out of it. Leave the need to understand everything. Leave the obsession with what people think. Leave the addiction to yesterday and walk with conviction, walk with humility, walk with courage, walk with patience, walk with faith in God. You will not always feel powerful when you walk. Sometimes you will walk with trembling hands. Sometimes you will walk while crying. Sometimes you will walk while questioning yourself. Sometimes you will walk without knowing whether the next step will be rewarded immediately. Walk anyway. Courage does not mean you never feel fear. Courage means fear does not become your master. There is a kind of fear that warns you, and there is a kind of fear that imprisons you. Wisdom listens to warning. Faith refuses imprisonment. Do not let every anxious thought become a prophecy. Just because you can imagine disaster does not mean disaster is coming. Just because you have failed before does not mean you will fail again. Just because somebody rejected you does not mean everybody will reject you. Just because one season was barren does not mean your entire life will be barren. God can change seasons. God can change circumstances. God can change direction. God can open what no human being expected to open. God can make a path where you see no path, but you must be willing to move when God says move. Some people keep asking God for a miracle while refusing to take the step that God already commanded. They want supernatural results without ordinary obedience. They want the destination without the journey. They want harvest without planting. They want victory without discipline. They want a new life while protecting every habit that belongs to the old life. You cannot carry everything with you. There are things you must leave behind. When you pack your bags, you choose what is coming with you. You cannot put your entire past into a suitcase. You have limited space. The journey requires selection. What deserves to come with you? Faith, wisdom, gratitude, discipline, integrity, patience, courage, compassion, a willingness to learn, a willingness to change, a willingness to trust God. What must stay behind? Bitterness, pride, constant comparison, endless excuses, fear of people's opinions, the belief that you are permanently disqualified because of something you did years ago, the assumption that your worst day represents your entire life. Leave it. Leave it. Leave it. God is calling you into a season where you will need both empty hands and a full heart. Empty hands because you cannot receive something new while clinging tightly to what God has told you to release. A full heart because the road ahead will require conviction. You cannot walk into a new future with a heart full of old resentment. You cannot build something new while constantly feeding the memory of what destroyed the old. You cannot keep drinking from the well of yesterday and expect your soul to become fresh tomorrow. Forgive what you can release. Learn what you can learn. Accept what you cannot change. Then move. Moving forward does not mean what happened did not matter. It means what happened will not have the final word. Some of you have allowed one sentence spoken by one person to become the law of your entire life. Someone told you that you were not good enough, and you believed it. Someone told you that you would never succeed, and you carried it. Someone told you that you were ordinary, and you built your identity around it. Someone failed to recognize your value, and you concluded that you had none. No, you will not allow another person's limitation to become your destiny. God knows your value. God knows your potential. God knows your purpose. God knows what is inside you, even when you cannot see it yourself. There will be seasons when you have to believe in what God is doing before you can see evidence of it. That is where conviction becomes stronger than circumstances. Anybody can be grateful when everything is working, but mature faith can stand when the evidence is still developing. Mature faith can say, I do not understand this season, but I will not abandon my trust in God. Do not make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. You may be tired today. That does not mean you are finished. You may be discouraged today. That does not mean your future is hopeless. You may have lost something today. That does not mean everything is lost. You may be disappointed today. That does not mean God has disappointed you. Sometimes you need to sleep, breathe, pray, regain your strength, and then keep moving. Even strong people become tired. Even courageous people become afraid. Even faithful people experience moments of uncertainty. The difference is that they do not build a permanent home inside a temporary feeling. Your feelings are real, but they are not always reliable guides. Your fear can feel certain and still be wrong. Your discouragement can feel final and still be temporary. Your sadness can feel endless and still have an expiration date. God is greater than the emotion of this moment. Do not make tomorrow serve yesterday. You have a future that deserves your attention. And God is saying, pack your bags. There is something powerful about a person who finally stops asking for permission to become who God called them to become. There is something powerful about a person who says, I will no longer spend my life trying to make everybody comfortable with my obedience. There is something powerful about a person who refuses to let criticism determine direction. People may not understand your journey because they were not given your assignment. They were not in your private prayers. They did not hear the conviction in your heart. They did not experience every moment that brought you to this decision. They see the movement. God sees the preparation. They see the departure. God sees the destination. They see the uncertainty. God sees the entire road. So stop demanding that everybody understand what only you and God have been carrying. There are times when silence is wisdom. There are times when explanation becomes distraction. There are times when the best answer to criticism is continued obedience. You do not have to fight every battle. You do not have to answer every accusation. You do not have to correct every misunderstanding. You do not have to attend every argument to which you are invited. Sometimes your assignment is simply to keep walking. Let your life speak. Let your consistency speak. Let your character speak. Let your results speak. Let God speak through what unfolds, but keep moving. Pack your bags. You have delayed long enough. You have stood at the edge of the decision long enough. You have asked the same question long enough. You have analyzed every possibility long enough. At some point, analysis becomes avoidance. At some point, preparation becomes procrastination. At some point, caution becomes fear wearing respectable clothing. Do not hide behind endless preparation when God is calling you to action. There is a time to prepare, and there is a time to step. There is a time to study the road, and there is a time to walk it. There is a time to ask questions, and there is a time to trust God beyond the answers. If you wait until you feel completely ready, you may never go. You will learn things on the road that you could never learn while standing still. You will discover strength you did not know you had. You will encounter opportunities you could not see from your old position. You will develop wisdom that only movement can produce. You will learn that some fears disappear only after you confront them. You will discover that the first step was not the end of certainty, but the beginning of understanding. So take the step, not recklessly, not foolishly, not impulsively, but faithfully. There is a difference. Faith is not carelessness. Faith is obedience guided by conviction. Ask God for wisdom. Ask God for discernment. Ask God for courage. Ask God to remove confusion. Ask God to expose what needs to be exposed. Ask God to close what needs to be closed. Ask God to strengthen you for what lies ahead. Then listen. And when the answer becomes clear, do not keep asking the same question because you dislike the answer. Sometimes people pray for guidance, but secretly want God to agree with their preference. They say, God, show me what to do. But what they really mean is, God, confirm what I already decided. That is not surrender. Surrender says, God, even if the answer is different from what I wanted, I will obey. That is where real faith begins. When you can say, God, I trust you more than I trust my own plan. When you can say, God, if you close this door, I will not break it down. When you can say, God, if you redirect me, I will not call the redirection failure. When you can say, God, if the road changes, my trust will not change. That is strength. And some of you are about to discover that what you called a setback was actually a redirection. The thing you cried over may become the thing you later thank God for. The place you were desperate to remain may become the place you later realize was too small. The person you thought you needed may have been the person you needed to release. The opportunity you thought was your only chance may have been the opportunity that prevented you from seeing a better one. God sees what you cannot see. That is why trust matters. You are trying to protect yourself from every possible disappointment, but you cannot live that way. If you demand certainty before every decision, you will become trapped by your own need for control. Control says, I will move when I know. Faith says, I will move because God has spoken. Control says, I need to see the entire road. Faith says, I need enough light for the next step. Control says, I need guarantees. Faith says, I need God. That is the difference. You do not need to know everything. You need to know what God is asking of you now, not next year, not 10 years from now. Now, what is the next obedient step? Take it. Then ask for the next one. This is how journeys are completed. One step, one decision, one act of obedience, one day, one prayer, one refusal to quit. One morning when you get up again, one evening when you choose gratitude despite disappointment, one moment when you choose faith instead of fear. And slowly, almost invisibly, you move farther than you ever thought possible. Do not underestimate small acts of obedience. A great future can begin with a very ordinary step. A new chapter can begin with one decision. A transformed life can begin with one sentence. God, I am willing. Not God, I understand everything. Not God, I have no fear. Not God, I have all the resources. Simply, God, I am willing. Willingness is powerful. A willing heart can be taught. A willing heart can be corrected. A willing heart can grow. A willing heart can move. A proud heart says, I already know. A willing heart says, God, teach me. A fearful heart says, I cannot. A willing heart says, God, strengthen me. A bitter heart says, they hurt me, so I will never trust again. A willing heart says, God, heal what was wounded and teach me how to move wisely. A defeated heart says, it is over. A willing heart says, God has not finished with me. And if God has not finished with you, then you have no right to declare your story finished. You may be in the middle. The middle is not the ending. You may be confused. Confusion is not the destination. You may be tired. Tired is not finished. You may be delayed. Delayed is not denied. You may be rebuilding. Rebuilding is not failure. You may be starting again. Starting again is not shame. Sometimes starting again is evidence of courage. There is dignity in beginning again. There is power in rebuilding. There is wisdom in admitting that the old way did not work and choosing a better way. Do not be embarrassed by a new beginning. Some of the strongest people you will ever meet are people who had to start over. They lost something. They learned something. They changed something. They began again. And God was with them in the rebuilding. So if you are rebuilding, do not apologize for the construction. Let the process happen. Dust does not mean destruction. Noise does not mean failure. Temporary disorder does not mean permanent chaos. You are under construction. Your life is developing. Your thinking is changing. Your priorities are changing. Your relationships are changing. Your understanding is changing. Your faith is deepening. And when God is moving you, not everybody will recognize the person you are becoming. That is okay. You do not need to remain the person. People remember if God is transforming you into someone stronger, wiser, more disciplined, more compassionate, and more faithful. Do not let somebody's old version of you become your prison. They may say, you have always been like this. You can answer with your life. Not anymore. They may say, you always give up. You can answer with persistence. They may say, you never finish anything. You can answer by finishing. They may say, you are too afraid. You can answer by walking while afraid. They may say, you will never change. You can answer by changing, not for them, for God, because your life is not a performance for human beings. Your obedience is between you and God. And when God says, go, you go. When God says, leave, you leave. When God says, begin, you begin. When God says, wait, you wait. When God says, release, you release. When God says, stand, you stand. The secret is not always knowing the reason. The secret is trusting the one who gives the direction. There are things you will understand only after you obey. You cannot see around every corner from the place where you are standing, move. Then the next part of the road will become visible, move. Then the next opportunity may appear, move. then the next piece of understanding may arrive, miv. Not because movement guarantees comfort, but because stagnation guarantees nothing. There are people waiting for certainty that will never come. They want a voice from heaven every morning. They want a sign for every decision. They want confirmation for every step. But God has already given them principles, wisdom, conscience, responsibility, and the ability to choose. Use what God has already placed in your hands. Do not keep asking for a new instruction when you have not obeyed the last one. This is a hard truth, but it will change your life. Sometimes the reason you do not receive the next instruction is because you have not acted on the current one. You want God to show you the next door. While you are still standing in front of the door, God told you to leave. Miv. Then ask again. Miv. Then listen again. Miv. Then trust again. Your life is not supposed to be one giant leap. It is a journey of faithful steps. And every step matters. Your discipline matters. Your integrity matters. The way you speak matters. The way you treat people matters. The way you handle money matters. The way you respond when nobody is watching matters. The way you recover after failure matters. The way you handle success matters. The way you handle disappointment matters. The way you handle power matters. The way you handle weakness matters, because the destination is not the only thing God cares about. God cares about who you become on the way there. Do not ask only, what will I receive? Ask, who will I become? Do not ask only, where am I going? Ask, what kind of person must I become to carry what God is preparing? Because sometimes God delays the destination to develop the person. You may be asking for the opportunity while God is building your capacity. You may be asking for influence while God is developing your character. You may be asking for abundance while God is teaching you stewardship. You may be asking for leadership while God is teaching you humility. You may be asking for recognition while God is teaching you to work without applause. Do not despise preparation, but do not use preparation as an excuse for disobedience either. Now the difference. God's preparation makes you stronger. Fierce procrastination makes you smaller. God's preparation develops you. Fierce procrastination delays you. God's preparation increases capacity. Fierce procrastination protects comfort. Learn to recognize the difference. There will be a moment when you know it is time. And when that moment comes, do not keep looking for another excuse. Pack your bags. There is something ahead of you that requires your movement. There is something you cannot reach from where you are. There is a conversation you need to have, a habit you need to break, a decision you need to make, a place you need to leave, a responsibility you need to accept, a dream you need to pursue, a fear you need to confront, a discipline you need to establish, a chapter you need to close, a new chapter you need to begin. And perhaps you have known it for a long time. You have felt it in the quiet moments. You have sensed it when you were alone. You have tried to ignore it. You have tried to distract yourself. You have told yourself, maybe later, but something inside you keeps saying, it is time. Listen, if the conviction is consistent, if the direction is wise, if the path aligns with truth and responsibility, stop running from the decision. God may be calling you out of complacency, out of fear, out of stagnation, out of a cycle, out of a relationship that continually destroys your peace, out of a pattern that continually produces the same failure, out of an environment that continually diminishes your growth, out of a mindset that continually tells you that you cannot become more. Pack your bags. But remember, going somewhere new does not automatically make you new. You must also change what you carry inside. A new city will not automatically produce a new mind. A new job will not automatically produce discipline. A new relationship will not automatically heal old wounds. A new opportunity will not automatically eliminate insecurity. A new environment cannot replace inner transformation. So while you move physically, move spiritually, while you change your circumstances, change your thinking. While you close one door, open your heart to growth. God does not merely want to move you geographically, God wants to move you internally, from fear to trust, from confusion to wisdom, from bitterness to maturity, from dependence on human approval to dependence on God, from excuses to responsibility, from hesitation to courageous obedience, from survival to purposeful living. That is the journey. And it will not always be comfortable. But comfort is not the highest goal. Purpose is greater than comfort. Truth is greater than comfort. Obedience is greater than comfort. Growth is greater than comfort. God is greater than comfort. If you only move when you are comfortable, you will never discover how strong you can become. Sometimes you have to walk through discomfort to reach development. Sometimes you have to say no to what feels good today so that you can say yes to what matters tomorrow. Sometimes you have to disappoint people to remain faithful to your convictions. Sometimes you have to sacrifice temporary pleasure for long-term purpose. Sometimes you have to walk alone for a season. But do not confuse being alone with being abandoned. God can be with you when nobody else understands.